It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Life in the Movies podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This week is going to be what I'm dubbing the animation celebration because, well, Bob Chapek put his foot in his mouth, and we're not going to be digging too deep into that. This is a positive podcast, and I want it to stay that way. So instead, we're just going to be Jacob and I, we're just going to be talking about animated movies that we love and animation in general. And of course, we will continue our coverage of Daredevil with Daredevil Season 2, Episode 5. But first, I have to introduce my co-host, who's wearing a very appropriate shirt for this, Jacob Martin. Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing good. First off, shout out to Rachel's Reviews for the shirt. It's her merch store. I decided to pick that up very recently. So, yeah, I'm a pretty big animation fan, and I want to share my love for the medium in today's video. I can't wait to talk about that and more Daredevil coverage. It's going to be another awesome episode. How's your day been, Ryan?
Bit of a crazy day. I won't get too deep into the weeds on it, but I lost my wallet earlier today.
Ooh.
I found it, but I lost it, and it was for a couple of hours. I felt like I was losing my mind, but thankfully there is a God in this world, and He was looking out for me today because, like I said, found it. Nothing was stolen. I don't know how, but nothing was stolen. It was just crazy day, but like I said, found it. It's all good. I just had to cancel my credit and my debit card because I was afraid someone might take it and buy a bunch of like Xboxes or something like that. So have to wait for replacements, but considering the alternative, it could have been 1,000 times worse.
Yeah, I had an interesting story recently. The other day, when I was getting off work, I conked my head on a breaker box and my head started bleeding out. Had to rush myself to the ER, but thankfully it wasn't bad enough of a scratch to get stitches or anything. It was just a minor little patch job, and I'm all right now. So I guess I gotta thank God for that too.
That was just from a box.
Yeah, like I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see it from
Oh,
here, but
that is
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, I hit it about right here and it started bleeding.
Oh, well, it, it seems like you're doing better now, so.
I mean, yeah, I'm pretty much back to work now and all's good.
Well, let's kick off the show today by talking about some stuff we've been watching lately. Why don't you go first?
Some recent stuff I've been watching. Well, actually, yesterday, as of this recording, I rewatched Enchanted for the first time in years. I decided to watch it for my upcoming celebrating Disney video and also to prepare myself for the sequel, Disenchanted, coming out on Disney Plus in a couple weeks. Now, Enchanted is one of those movies where I haven't seen in so long, and I've had conflicting thoughts on it throughout the years. I respect a lot of aspects of it, but I haven't been the biggest fan of like the parody satire stuff. However, watching this movie again for the first time in so long, it's honestly much better than I remember it. Honestly, the satire elements actually work in such a way to where it pokes fun of all of the classic Disney tropes, the true love's kiss and the love at first sight and the last stroke of 12 and all those tropes. But it does it in such a positive light to where it's a love letter and homage to the Disney movies as well, which I feel like recent Disney movies have backfired at that. I mean, you look at films like Maleficent and our Disney Plus movie called Godmothered, and both of those movies, you know, really hit the hammer on the head with their claims that, oh, the old movies are outdated and our cringy hit movies are better, but they don't have the timeless appeal of some of those other movies. Where I feel like Enchanted, I feel like a movie like Enchanted was made out of love compared to those other movies, which were more cynical in their approach. And Enchanted has held up a lot better at the end of the day. Of course, this was the film that launched Amy Adams' career as an actress. She's great as Giselle. I love her chemistry with Patrick Dempsey. I like seeing the back and forth contrast between the two characters and the love story that blossomed from there. James Marsden is hilarious as the prince. He has some of the funniest elements in the whole movie. I think we brought that up in last week's episode where he jumps off the bridge and sings and gets run over by bikes, and it's hilarious. Uh, and then you got like Timothy Spall in this movie, and Susan Sarandon as the villain, who's very over the top. I love the songs from Alan Menken and Steven Schwartz. All around, this is a great movie, and it's one where I think the older I get and the more I revisit it, it gets better with age. And I think as a Disney fan, I think there's a lot to admire with a movie like Enchanted.
It's really interesting that Disney would create kind of an in-house parody of itself that would be so self-aware of themselves.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I feel like of the movies where they've done that, Enchanted is the one where I feel like they did it the best. And then there's been some animated films that have poked fun of past tropes, particularly Frozen. But I think Frozen is like Enchanted in a lot of ways, where it does a lot of the poking fun of the tropes, but it tells its own story that you can take seriously and you can still get invested in the story. Whereas in other movies, it's just cringeworthy, like the Maleficent movie, for instance.
Oh, don't get Rachel started on Maleficent. That you could go all day on that one, but yeah, I am looking forward to Disenchanted. I have expressed my distaste for all things meta, but Enchanted did it right the first time, and so I'm giving it some benefit of the doubt for Disenchanted. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it is. Hopefully it is as good as his predecessor. But what else have you been watching?
I've been catching up on my Peter Bogdanovich series. I've recently tackled two of his movies. The first one is a film called They All Laughed, which is a film that came out in 1981. And it pretty much is a story, it's pretty much a hangout movie about these detectives who are called to investigate these women that are cheating on their husbands. But yet, our main characters get caught in some pretty scandalous affairs as well. And the movie has an interesting cast. I mean, you got people like I think John Rither is in this movie, and Ben Gazzara. They're like the two detectives who get caught in these scandals. There was an actress named Dorothy Stratton who was a lover of the director who was sadly murdered before the time of the movie's release. So the film was dedicated to her memory. But she was good in the movie. May that actress rest in peace. Considering I haven't really cared about Bogdanovich's movies post Paper Moon, this movie was actually pretty decent. The movie definitely is slow and it feels, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes too long. But the movie did have a decent premise. I actually thought the film was hilarious at times with its premise. I did like the cast. It has a really good soundtrack, and I overall enjoyed what Bogdanovich attempted to do with this movie. I don't think it's near as memorable as some of his best films, but considering some of his other films, especially in the late 70s and 80s, have been duds, this one was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and I saw on your letterbox that you also watched Mask.
Yeah, Mask is the other one, and that one was more well known, and I had actually heard of before diving into the project. This one is about it's based on a true story actually. I didn't know about this story. It's about a kid named Rocky who who had a disfigured face, and it almost looked like he was wearing a mask, but no, that was his actual face. And the teenage boy is played by Eric Stoltz, and it's fascinating that Mask came out in 1985, and Eric Stoltz almost was Marty McFly in Back to the Future. He was originally cast when they couldn't get Michael J. Fox, but Robert Zemeckis and Stoltz could not see eye to eye on the vision of the film. Eric Stoltz was kicked off of Back to the Future, and of course the rest is history. And they got Michael J. Fox, and he was obviously the best choice. So it actually worked that Eric Stoltz was in Mask because he's really good in the film. I actually really liked his performance, and I think it worked better for him that he was in a movie like Mask instead of Back to the Future because it sounded like he was a more serious, dramatic actor compared to Michael J. Fox, who definitely fit in better with Back to the Future's comedy. So sometimes things work out in the best ways. The kid's mother is played by Cher, who is absolutely fantastic in the film. Probably the best acting I've seen from Cher, which I think which is saying something because she won an Oscar for the movie Moonstruck, which that's a movie I have seen, and that's a movie where I'm like, it's okay. I'm not like head over heels in love with that movie, but she's okay in that. She's really great in the movie Mask. I really enjoyed her performance. Sam Elliott is also in the film, and there's also a young Laura Dern who is in the movie as well. I really enjoyed the story. I felt like the movie did a good job of respecting the guy's actual life, and it was done with so much care by Bogdanovich as a director. I think it's one of his best films. Definitely the strongest work he's done alongside Paper Moon. I think it's a really good movie if you haven't seen it.
Unfortunately, my only real knowledge of Cher as an actress is in Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, where she's Meryl Streep's mom. Not gonna lie, like her and I can't remember the older gentleman. It starts with it's not Anthony, but it's like
Oh,
Andy
the other
Garcia.
Andy Garcia, yeah.
Andy Garcia, where they sing Fernando. I was not expecting that to be so good, but it really was. I mean, I
Cher
guess
was the best part in that movie.
I guess I shouldn't expect that much. I mean, Cher is Cher, so I guess saying that she was saying really good is like saying water is wet, I suppose, but that's only my only real exposure, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely a movie you need to check out if you haven't seen it.
All right, what else you got?
I think the last one I'm gonna share, The Incredibles, another recent watch I did for Celebrating Disney. That review is now on the channel. That's my favorite Pixar movie of all time. It's been my favorite since I was a kid. I should probably save it for the animation celebration, honestly, because it's definitely one that got me into I think a deeper appreciation for animation as a whole, and it also got me into superheroes. But but I guess I'll save that for a later discussion.
Yeah, let's save it for the main event. But yeah, The Incredibles it is really good. I wasn't gonna say incredible because that joke's been done to death. But as for me, what I've been watching, just a couple things. Number one, I've started watching my Christmas movies for Christmania 2022. So the other night I watched Remember the Night. Uh, this was uh, this was starring and Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. It's about Fred McMurray, who is a district attorney who has to defend Barbara Stanwyck, who is a shoplifter, and the two essentially fall in love with each other. I've seen some rave reviews for this movie, but it was good, but I wasn't like falling head over heels for it. I more respect Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck because those two were just fantastic actors in their day. Fred McMurray in stuff like Double Indemnity, among other things, and Barbara Stanwyck has been in too many things to mention. She was one of the greats, and those two when they are together are the best part of that movie. But I don't know. I was like, this is good, but I didn't really love it, if that makes any sense at all. And then I watched The Shop Around the Corner, which is a movie that I honestly loved. It starred James Stewart and Margaret Sullivan. Stewart plays the manager of this shop, and he pretty much hates a woman who runs the shop next door. However, the two are secretly have pen pals, and they don't know that their pen pals are each other. So they're falling in love. They just don't know it yet. And for a movie that was released in 1940, 1940, it touches on some pretty dark stuff. There is a scene where the owner of the shop James Stewart's character works at, he's played by Frank Morgan, who was the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. He there is a scene where it is not just implied, but is nearly shown of him trying to kill himself, like to commit suicide. And for 1940, I'm honestly shocked that they were able to even imply that, let alone get away with it. So I appreciate the guts on director Ernst Lubitsch for doing that. But it's James Stewart. He's of course one of if not the best parts of the movie. And this is a movie that would later be remade a bunch of times. I think the most famous example is You Got Mail, or You've Got Mail, starring Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. But yeah, Shop Around the Corner is secretly really good.
Yeah, I've seen The Shop Around the Corner before, but it's been so long and it does need a fresh rewatch. I might cover it on my Christmas series coming up, honestly. I actually did watch You've Got Mail for the first time earlier this year, and I did a live collab with Rachel, who's such a big fan of the film. The first time I ever got her on my channel, and we did a live discussion on You've Got Mail. That's been one of the highlights of the year for me. Was getting Rachel on the YouTube channel to talk about one of her favorite movies. What was the other movie you watched? The one with Fred and Barbara?
Remember the Night.
Yeah, that one, to me, it's just interesting that they were in a Christmas movie together when Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck were also in Double Indemnity, which is a completely different movie.
Oh yeah, completely different. As someone who has seen the movie and reviewed it for the AFI project, oil, water. That's all I will say. But next up in my Christmas movie series, I gotta watch Meet Me in St. Louis, starring Judy Garland, which I've never seen. I've heard really good things. And a movie called The Holly and the Ivy, which is getting good letterboxd reviews, but I've never seen it. So hoping that one is good as well.
I haven't heard of that latter one.
Yeah, there's going to be some on my Christmas series that are going to be a little off the beaten path. Just for a brief preview, I've got the original Were No Angels. I got a movie on here called The Crowded Day, starring starring John Gregson and Joan Rice. Let's see. No, I got a movie called The Gathering, starring Ed Asner as kind of like a Christmas Carol, but instead of ghosts, it's like his family and trying to reunite his family, which is pretty much scattered into the wind. So it's going to be a bit of an interesting series this year, and I'm so looking forward to jumping in and talking about it. But that's going to be a little down the road. But what have you all been watching lately? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. All right, Jacob, let's get into Daredevil season 2, episode 5. The episode's called Kinbaku. I hope I'm saying that right. A former lover arrives in Hell's Kitchen and turns Murdoch's world upside down. Karen digs for the truth about the Punisher. So, Jacob, Elektra, man, you got your first taste of Elektra. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was fun seeing Elektra actually done really well. Because, like I said last week, I've seen the Ben Affleck movie from 2003, and one of the worst aspects about that movie was the whole relationship with Daredevil and Elektra, and there was honestly no chemistry between Ben Affleck and Jennifer Gardner. Now, in contrast, the Daredevil show, Charlie Cox and the actress who plays Elektra have electric chemistry together, and it was really awesome seeing the two actors bounce off each other playing these two characters who are very similar but have different motivations, and it was fun seeing them bounce off each other. The most interesting aspect about this episode, I actually thought, were the flashbacks, where we get to see how Daredevil and Elektra meet, how they fell in love, and how she manipulated Daredevil into finding the killer of Daredevil's father, Matt Murdock's father. I was not expecting it to go in that direction, but I thought that was a good moment for the series to reflect upon Matt Murdock's morals. Uh, and I thought that was done very well. I feel like for the most part, this was kind of a filler episode to me. It had some interesting setups. Like it introduces Elektra. It continues on, Karen's investigation on the Punisher and stuff. But it felt like the episode kind of went at a sluggish pace. Like the episode didn't really do as much compared to in the previous episodes, but there were still some interesting nuggets in there that held my attention. And it ends on that cliffhanger, and I'm excited to see what happens next week. But this one moved a lot slower compared to the other episodes, which had a lot more higher stakes. I think because the Punisher is not in this one, that does kind of hurt the pacing a little bit.
Yeah, he's only talked about off screen, and all the Punisher stuff is pretty much allocated to Karen Page, which I thought that was honestly quite interesting. But at the same time, you do feel the lack of Punisher here. It really does show, especially since the last couple of episodes, Penny and Dime and New York's Finest were so Punisher heavy and John Bernthal just tears up the screen every time that he's on there as Punisher. It's like his absence creates a vacuum that the show doesn't really know how to fill, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It is very hard when John Bernthal, had some very memorable monologues and was very intense to watch on screen, especially in the last two episodes. It's really hard filling in the gap, as hard as the show tried.
Yeah, and the show really did try. This isn't a bad episode by any stretch, but it definitely is noticeable. And just a bit of a fun fact, this is the lowest rated episode on IMDb for season 2, sitting at just an 8.2, which is very impressive, especially for IMDb. But just to give some clarity, New York's Finest and Penny and Dime both have 9.4 ratings on IMDb, which that really just says quite a bit. And then later on in the season, we got 7 Minutes in Heaven, which is a 9.4, and the last episode, A Cold Day in Hell's Kitchen, which is a 9.1. So the best is yet to come. That's all we will say here. But what did you think of that scene where they break into the boxing gym and they like have that fight and then it just ends in them making out? I was just sitting there like, of all the places to do that, a boxing gym is probably like the worst place to do it.
Yeah, that was a very weird scene. I didn't really know what to make of that, honestly.
Yeah, they started sparring and it's like, and then they're like, oh, we're just gonna make out in this dirty boxing ring. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
to me, it was kind of weird that Matt Murdock would do that because he's clear. I mean, they had feelings for each other in the past, but that was in the past. I mean, I like Matt Murdock and Karen a lot more than him and Elektra, so that just seemed a little out of character for me.
Yeah, well, like I said, definitely a filler episode. We got at least a good Foggy moment, like when Tower tries to lean in on them, is like, you just show us a subpoena and we'll do whatever you want. And then the guy's like, yeah, gonna need to do it off the books. And Foggy's like, ain't no way. It's like, good for Foggy. He is the sleeper character on this whole show.
Yeah, facts.
Now, what did you all think of this episode? If you have seen it, leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. All right, Jacob, let's get into the main event for the evening, the animation celebration. Now, this is going to be a bit of a free-flowing kind of segment. We're not going for any specific format. It's just us shooting the breeze about animation. So I thought it would be fun. I'll go with my first animated movie first, and then maybe go with yours, and then we can bounce off each other from there. So my first one, my dad took me to see Monsters, Inc. And this is a movie that I think doesn't get nearly the love that I think it does deserve, because it's a very funny movie, and they got the perfect people to voice Sully and Mike in John Goodman and Billy Crystal, respectively. They both are just fantastic together. The animation really does hold up. I think it's a sleeper hit for Pixar.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Monsters Inc. I'm pretty sure it was the first Pixar film I might have watched, and for the longest time as a kid, I actually liked it more than Toy Story. which is an unpopular opinion, I guess, but that was how I was as a kid, and I think it's flip flop now. But Monsters Inc. is still a great movie, and I love the buddy pairing of Billy Crystal and John Goodman in that movie.
I think this is the first Pixar movie with the true, like, tearing at the heartstrings ending, because with the whole thing where they finally beat Mr. Waternoose and they get the footage of him saying, I would let 1,000 children die before I let this company die, or something like that. Then they cart him off, and Roz is the sleeper agent of 2.5 years of undercover work were almost wasted. I love Roz. Wazowski, you didn't file your paperwork last night.
His office is now closed.
Ah! His poor fingers get crushed. But yeah, Roz is awesome. And then the ending where she says, bring me a door shredder, and Sully's like, I can't see her again. And she's like, that's the way it has to be. I'll give you 10 minutes. And you're like, oh, please don't do this to me. Please, please. And then when the door shreds, you're like, there is no there is no hope. But then at the end, the secret bonus ending where Mike rebuilds the door gets activated, and Sully opens it, and you just hear Kitty, and like, she's alive. It's such a great ending.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's a amazing payoff to that movie.
So what was your first animated movie?
Um, well, I think I had seen some animated movies as a kid. We had a lot of Disney movies on VHS. Some of my earliest memories were watching films like Pocahontas and The Rescuers Down Under. But I think the first animated movie that I saw that I fell in love with was The Jungle Book, the classic Disney film from 1967, which was Walt Disney's final animated film that he had personal involvement with. Now, this is a movie where I think as an adult, the story is definitely on the weak side. Like, it's very episodic, where Mowgli goes from person to person in the jungle. You can flip flop scenes around. It doesn't really make much impact. But as a kid, I loved like the energy of this movie. Like, all of the characters were fun and breezy. The songs from the Sherman Brothers were fantastic. Like, even as a kid, like, I was toe tapping to these songs and singing along to, hits like The Bare Necessities and I Want to Be Like You. It was just a fun hangout time. I enjoyed. I think a part of the reason why I'm a fan of hangout movies, especially when they're done well, I think it's because of movies like The Jungle Book. I actually haven't really thought of it until talking about it right now on this podcast. But there you go. This is a great movie, mainly for the characters and the music. I know it's not like the most faithful adaptation of the source material, but as its own thing, The Jungle Book is a lot of fun, and watching it as a kid got me into the wonderful world of animation. So I got to give it credit for that.
Yeah, and shout out to this movie being 78 minutes long, and it tells a pretty much a 3-act story in that amount of time. Like, it's unheard of to do something like that today. So props to them for getting the job done. But yeah, this movie's awesome. It's one of my I haven't made a solid favorite Disney movies list. Someday on the channel, I want to do what Rachel did and review every movie in the Disney canon, but that's going to be a long ways off. But I'm a big fan of The Jungle Book. I love the songs. Look for the bare necessities. It's just, that's such a great song. And King Louis' song, Keep Christopher Walken Far Away from a Microphone. Just side note. But that whole sequence of Baloo just like jiving with King Louis as he's secretly trying to distract everyone while Bagheera gets Mowgli out of there, and it just turns into chaos. It's like,
Take me home, Daddy.
it's such a great sequence. It's so much fun. But yeah, we should do a watch along to that since we both love it so much.
Yes.
But but there is I can't remember what was the first animated movie that really stood out to me and said like, "Wow, this is kind of magic." I can't really think of one per se. I guess my respect for it has just always been there. I don't know, Jacob, if there's a certain movie to be like transitioning over from these are fun to this is art.
I think for me, going back to Disney, because I think a lot of my formative years in animation was Disney. The one that did that for me, well, old school, it would be Peter Pan. That movie completely floored me on how the do world building in animation. Like as a kid, Neverland was like the fantasy place I wanted to go to. It sounded like an awesome place to hang out. Like the different creatures and the characters that inhabit Neverland, and you can have fun adventures with Peter Pan. But there's still a good meaning to Peter Pan even as an adult. You go and watch Peter Pan as a kid, and you just see, oh, Peter Pan fighting Captain Hook, and he just hangs out in Neverland where he never grows up. Where you watch it as an adult, and you get the deeper themes of, that sounds fun and all as a kid, but it's actually kind of sad to live in a place where you never grow up and face responsibility and do any of that stuff. And watching it as an adult, I like Wendy's character arc where she originally doesn't want to grow up and she goes to Peter Pan, but the more she hangs out, it's like, this isn't really that fun. I gotta face responsibilities, and I need to learn to do that, and that inspires her to want to grow up and have that responsibility while still maintaining the childlike innocence of characters like Peter Pan. I think it's a great movie with a lot of resonant themes, and I loved it as a kid mainly for its magic and world building, and the animation is still great all these years later. But I think going into movies that I think that was coming out at the time where I was watching, where I'm like, this is art. I would have to say The Incredibles. Going into that, that was a movie where that was I think that was like a very formative CGI animated film for me because uh, that was so groundbreaking. That was to me that was the first animated film where somebody finally got human characters down very well, photorealistically. Because you look back and watch like Toy Story and some of the earliest CG animated films, and you look back at them today, and they are kind of uncanny looking. They look a little on the creepy side. They didn't have the technology to get them down just right. But I felt like The Incredibles was the first one where they really got the human textures down so good, and you can carry a feature length film with human characters doing awesome stuff. And just the whole movie was just amazing with like the architecture, the landscapes, the water, the hair. That it just blew me away that somebody could do that off of computers. And not only that, but the other thing I respect about The Incredibles is it pretty much was my introduction to superheroes. I didn't read much comic books as a kid. I didn't really get into those types of characters. And so the movie that got me into the whole superhero concept was an original story created by Brad Bird, which was The Incredibles. And loving that movie as a kid was what got me intrigued by the MCU, the DCU, and some of the other existing comic book characters. So there's a lot that I respect about The Incredibles, mainly for its animation along with the original storytelling and getting me into a genre that's pretty much the most popular genre there is today.
Yeah, absolutely. And my mom and dad both love The Incredibles. They both think it's fantastic. To this day, they will quote to each other the scene where Frozone is getting ready for his dinner date with his wife, and the big battle at the end is happening, and he goes for the suit, and the suit is not there. And he's like, "Honey, where's my super suit?" And she's like, "It's not here." And I can't remember the scene off the top, but I just love the line where he's like, "This is for the greater good," and she's like, "Greater good? I'm your wife. This is the greatest good you're ever gonna get." I'm like, wow. Pixar,
Somebody's in the doghouse tonight.
that's for sure. especially since he nearly met his end a couple times during that battle. So
Yeah, that is a great movie. I love especially the action sequences. Rewatching it again recently for my sobering Disney series. I mean, it's impressive how well they still hold up. Like I still get goosebumps during the whole. I know it's jokingly called the 100-meter dash scene where he got Dash running and he's going for all those different landscapes and then he runs on water. I'm like, I bet that must have been a challenge to animate that, especially in 2004. But Brad Bird and his crew pulled it off, and it's still one of the most visually striking pieces of animation I think in the entire medium.
Brad Bird has not missed. I mean, maybe except Tomorrowland, which I like the ideas presented. The execution wasn't the best, but Brad Bird has not missed, fair to say.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, I know Disney is pretty much the king of animation, especially nowadays, but there are so many other companies that were doing animation and still are. And one, when I was doing research for this, that popped up, haven't thought about this movie for a minute, but Jacob, have you seen the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie?
No, actually not.
It's essentially a clip show, but if you're a big Looney Tunes fan like I am, it's a fantastic movie. It's 98 minutes long. So it's a pretty short watch, but it's a clip show stylized, and I think I'm getting the right framing device, but you get Bugs Bunny in this big old house that he lives in, and he's drinking carrot juice, but he's like popping an actual carrot and pouring it into a glass. It's a nice little gag there, but you see several great all-timer Looney Tunes cartoons, like Robin Hood Daffy with the iconic scene of Daffy like doing yoinks and away and hitting all the trees and like yoinks and away, yoinks and away, yoinks and away. It's a phenomenal bit. And it also has Duck Amuck on there, which is my personal favorite Looney Tunes cartoon of all time. I could watch that on loop for days on end, and it would never get old for me. Just the animator just messing around with Daffy for just like 5 minutes, and it is just phenomenal. Like if you all have not seen it, go see it. Find it on HBO Max or somewhere, but see it. And then there's the one that I believe got nominated for an Oscar and even won, What's Opera Doc? And this is just a phenomenal piece of business where it's what we've seen before with Bugs Bunny versus Elmer Fudd done in the style of an opera. And it's genius. If you all haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and watch that and watch Duck Amuck.
Let's not forget the best part of that short. Kill the rabbit, kill the rabbit, kill the rabbit.
The best part for sure.
I can't take the song seriously. Like that scene in Apocalypse Now where you got all the helicopters flying around. That song's playing in the background. Like I hear that and I want to sing "Kill the
Kill the
Rabbit,
wab,
Kill
kill.
the Rabbit."
It's great when Bugs Bunny's like, and how will you kill me? He's like, with my spew and magic helmet. He's like, yes, magic helmet, and I will give you a sample. It's just phenomenal stuff. And and it's important to note that Disney kind of took a bit of a hit in the late 70s, early 80s. There was Don Bluth who branched off from them and did stuff like American Tail, Land Before Time, bunch of other stuff. But then the Renaissance hit, and they're back at it again.
Yeah. When did this Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie come out again?
79. So
Oh yeah, so that was in the middle of the Disney Dark Age because Don Bluth left Disney that year.
yeah, and it really was a dark time. I remember speaking to Rachel about it, and she was talking about the Little Mermaid, and she was saying that when they were doing voiceover work, they were literally closing up offices and boxing things up. So it was a very dark time. It was literally sink or swim time, and they swam. That's all I will say.
Yeah, the Little Mermaid pretty much saved Disney animation as a whole, and I don't think the studio would be where it is today if it wasn't for the Little Mermaid.
Yeah, and then the Renaissance hit, and like I said, they just were churning out nothing but classics. I mean, you got The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Aladdin, I mean, just The Lion King. The list just goes on and on and on and on and on. And
Yeah,
like big gems and even little gems, like gems that are pretty underrated today, I would say.
yeah, and the Renaissance era is easily my favorite era of Disney animation because like not only did that revive Disney animation, but those stories have just held up so tremendously well. And plus, it has some of the best 2D animation that the studio ever put out. Also, it brought the Broadway style musical numbers, which are still felt in the Disney movies to this day. There's just a lot to take in the Disney Renaissance era. And there were a lot of movies that made me an animation fan because I watched a lot of them as a kid. Beauty and the Beast is still one of my absolute favorites. I think that was my first cartoon crush, which was Belle, and she's still my favorite Disney princess in this day. I love the love story in that film, and the songs in that movie are just absolute bangers, like the title track, Rest in Peace, Angela Lansbury, Be Our Guest, Belle, Gaston, Alan Menken and Alan Menken and Howard Ashman are like the unsung heroes of that movie, especially Howard Ashman, who unfortunately passed away during production of that movie. He put his heart and soul into this movie, and I think he even co-wrote the screenplay, if I'm not mistaken. But it was like his dedication to telling a very beautiful love story in the form of animation with incredible songs. It really spoke wonders to the quality of the movie, and it was also the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture, which is still a rarity for that to happen. Like, there's only like three animated movies that have done that in the history of the Oscars. It's really sad that the Oscars undervalue animation. Just see it as like a throwaway art form that's only there for like kids or pretty much. But hey, it's impressive that Beauty and the Beast got nominated. I really love the movie.
For sure, it's like animation and horror. Those are like the two genres that get absolutely no respect from the Academy. The Academy has a type, and they continually search for that type, but that's a whole nother show for another time. Let's keep things positive. And keeping along, I wanted to bring up some more like non-Disney stuff and even non-DreamWorks stuff. In the 2000s, there was some pretty imaginative stuff. Like, for example, I remember recommending Monster House. I can't remember where it was, but I've always loved that movie. I've always thought, and I guess it was just me being in the right place at the right time and just the right age group, but the animation is stellar. It's directed by Gil Kenan, and he's done quite a bit. And just I love this story. I love how layered it is for a 90-minute movie that reran and reran endlessly on Cartoon Network. They turned more story out of it than most animated movies of similar length. It was, like I said, directed by Gil Kenan, produced by Robert Zemeckis, and voices include Mitchell Musso, who was a big Disney Channel star. Steve Buscemi as the guy who lives in the house. His name is Mr. Nevercracker, which that's a great name for an old man, that's for sure. And then Maggie Gyllenhaal is one of the voices, and there's two police officers in this movie who are voiced by, hang on to your seat, Jacob, Kevin James and Nick Cannon. You can't believe it, can you?
That's a crazy duo right there.
The host of Wild and Out teamed up with the guy from The King of Queens. You would never picture it, but they surprisingly work well together, I will say. But yeah, Monster House is really underrated.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in so long. I remember liking it though as a kid, even with the darker imagery. But it's one I need to revisit. But speaking of like that style of animation, like it's like motion capture, CGI animation, one that really stood out to me as a kid. I think it's one that's a little bit mocked in today's standards. People are like, "Ooh, this animation's so creepy. That means the movie's bad." I still love the movie to this day, and I'm proud to admit it. The Polar Express from 2004, directed by Robert Zemeckis. I think, like you said with Monster House, I think it was one of those movies that came out at the right time for me. I think it was about 10 years old, 9, 10 years old when the movie first came out. And I think the movie came out at the right time for me because I was still invested in Christmas, but I was getting at that age to where is Santa Claus a real thing or not, or is that just a Christmas myth? And watching it as a kid, I was like, this movie is awesome. Like, you got like the whole concept of the Polar Express, the magical train that takes the kids up to the North Pole, and the lucky kid gets the first gift of Christmas from Santa Claus. I remember being just so blown away by the animation style in this movie. I think so much to the point where there were a few times in the movie as a kid where I questioned because the characters look so photorealistic. I honestly felt like I was watching a live action movie at times. Of course, now you can tell it's an animated movie, especially because of the technical limitations now. I think now people see that it came out in 2004 and are like, oh, the motion capture dates this movie and it looks creepy. I've never been once creeped out by this movie, although I can see if younger people watching it that they would say it's creepy, I guess. But I'm still blown away by the animation and what Robert Zemeckis brought to the story. There's just some amazing visual sequences in this movie, like when the train is crossing over the frozen lake where the track's frozen underneath. That was such an adrenaline rush for me as a kid because it honestly felt like you were on a roller coaster ride with the characters, and it was such an amazing visual sequence. I love the score from Alan Silvestri, which complements the animation. And it's easily like, to me, the score that screams Christmas the most is the Polar Express, along with Josh Groban's amazing song Believe. I just think it's a really good story, along with incredible visuals. In my opinion, it's one of the best films from Robert Zemeckis, up there with films like Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I think of the motion capture animation films he worked on, it's my personal favorite.
So I don't love the Polar Express as much as you do. I think some of the kids are really creepy, in the words of Owen Wilson from the Haunting. But I can see why people do love it, and it does look beautiful in certain instances. The train scene where they're traveling across that ice, I was just I was blown away by that.
Yeah, there's a lot of sequences like that. There's another scene where the ticket gets blown out of the window, and there's like a good 3 5 minute sequence where you're just following the ticket from place to place, and it's done like this one continuous shot. I think that might have been the first instance of a one continuous shot, at least in my knowledge, that I saw. And even to this day, I'm still blown away how he did that.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal little sequence. Yeah, it definitely makes you ask yourself, how did they do that? It's incredible. Well, when doing research for this, I stumbled upon an animated movie that I know I saw, but it just seems such an oddity. Have you ever heard of The Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole?
I have seen that one before. That's that Owl movie that Zack Snyder did, right?
Yes. And I remember seeing it and liking it, but just it's such a weird thing for Zack Snyder to have in his filmography.
I know, considering he's done a bunch of DC films and 300 and Watchmen, and his first movie was the remake of Dawn of the Dead, which was written by James Gunn. The odd movie that he did, but I actually really like it. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I actually really like the animation. The story is pretty riveting at times, and for a animated movie involving a bunch of owls, it can get pretty gruesome at times.
There's a beautiful scene where the main owl, I believe his name is, hang on, I believe his name is Soren. And there's a beautiful scene where he's like flying through this like not a starry background, but like a snowy thing, and he's just like flying
Yeah.
there. Is like, this is beautiful stuff right here.
Yeah, I love the visuals in this movie. There's a lot of sequences where you can tell like Zack Snyder was really passionate about animation and he wanted to create a very mesmerizing movie that fits just as much with his other movies with a distinct visual style, just in animation form.
Yeah, another one of my favorites that people don't talk about nearly as much is Rango from 2011.
Ooh, man, that's a good one.
Yeah, Johnny Depp as this little lizard who thinks he's a thespian and is just not. Isla Fisher as this character named Beans. Ned Beatty, the late Ned Beatty, rest in peace, as the mayor. Bill Nye as Rattlesnake Jake, which, holy crap, the design on Jake is just terrifying to me to this day. Just such a loaded cast and such a beautiful looking movie, too.
Yeah, that's a movie where I liked the movie as a kid. I had a lot of fun with it, but the older you get and the more movies you watch, you start to realize, the influences that Rango picked up on. Because as a kid, I just thought Rango was an original story, but the core concept of the film, with Rango pretending to be a lawman, was taken from a Don Knotts movie called The Shakiest Gun in the West, and then the whole premise of like the mayor who's like controlling the water supply uh, to manipulate the people and stuff was taken from a 70s film called Chinatown starring Jack Nicholson. So it's interesting seeing some of the movies that Rango took influence from, which aren't really kid friendly movies, well, except maybe the Don Knotts one, but that's a different story. But Rango definitely told its own story with that, and it was a fun homage to westerns as well. And I love the voice cast and the animation was very well done. I kind of wish Gore Verbinski directed more animated movies because he just did Rango, and that movie was such a surprise hit, and it even won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. So you think he would do more?
A very underrated duo, Depp and Verbinski. It's like Scorsese, DiCaprio, and then Verbinski, Depp. And I'm not comparing the two duos because, I mean, they're like this far apart. But in terms of like director actor duos who have done nothing but just solid work together, I would put Verbinski and Depp in that conversation.
Yeah, they definitely did make a good pair between that and the Pirates movies.
Agreed. And I don't know if this is going to be a bit of a hot take, but I've always kind of had a soft spot for the Hotel Transylvania movies. And people turn their noses up at these movies like Adam Sandler. How dare he make an animated movie? It's like, they're funny, guys. Come on now. And maybe it's because of my love for the Universal monsters, but I love these movies and they're not the best. And yes, it's definitely Adam Sandler and all of his friends, but they're funny and I really enjoy them. If I'm alone on that, I will die on that hill.
You're not alone. I like the movies too.
They're
And
good.
I've seen all four of the movies, and they are incredibly fun to watch. I love like the cartoonish animation and how intentionally cartoonish it is, and the voice cast is good. I like the homages to the classic monster films, but in a comical style. They're all fun movies. I don't really get why people don't like them.
I think Adam Sandler just for the longest time just picked nothing but crap projects, and I've heard nothing but nice things about the guy. He seems like a generally wonderful person, so I'm not slagging on him personally, but he just had bad taste for a really long time, like Little Nicky. I mean, just like
Jack and Jill.
Oh God, Jack and Jill. That's the movie I was thinking of. But yeah, but it seems like nowadays with Uncut Gems, and like I said, the Hotel Transylvania movies. He can be good with the right material. That is important, the right material.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that for sure. I actually prefer his Dracula over most of the comedy films I've seen him in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And shout out to Gendy Tartakovsky, who directed all these movies, and he's a legend in the animation game. Did the animation for Samurai Jack, and just he's a legend. Like if he's not a legend already, he's becoming a legend. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, there's two. Speaking of Hotel Transylvania, two animation franchises that really stood out to me and pretty much formed my love for animation as a whole. Um, Actually, these were both from DreamWorks. Actually, the first one is Kung Fu Panda. That franchise with Jack Black as Poe. The first film was such a surprise hit because going in, I knew the film would be funny because it's Jack Black as a Kung Fu Panda. I wasn't really expecting how passionate this film was going to be as far as telling a very cohesive story, really doing a good job with its culture, exploring the world of Kung Fu with these various characters, and also getting you invested in a big shabby panda like Poe, who could have easily been an obnoxious character with the weight and the obsession with eating, but you still want to root for him as the underdog, and he ends up being the warrior who saves the day in the end. Like I love the first movie, and the trilogy. Actually, there's a fourth movie coming out in a couple of years, but the trilogy at this time, each film has something interesting and unique about it. Two, I would say, is even better, and that one I'd say is like the hidden sleeper gem of the three because that film had such a dark premise. We have like an evil peacock voiced by Gary Oldman. We got a peacock who's evil, and he's like one of the scariest things you'll see in an animated movie. Uh, and how he connects to Poe as a character, and how he ends up negatively impacting the species around him, especially his family. There's a lot of like really deep layers and dark layers within the story about achieving inner peace, even in the midst of pain and trauma. And it was just some really dark layers that I think really enhanced the story, and it really I think made me appreciate the film that much more, even when I first saw it. And you still have the comedy stuff that makes these movies work, and yet you have a story dealing with trauma and dealing with inner peace at the front and center of it. You think that wouldn't work, but DreamWorks made it work, and it's one of the best animated movies that DreamWorks has done. The third film is pretty good too, but Kung Fu Panda 2 is like the clear standout of that whole trilogy.
Without a doubt. I remember seeing it. I'm like, wow, this is like one of the few movies that I think is better than the first because the first Kung Fu Panda movie is great, but it takes the next step and develops Poe instead of he loses everything, he's got to find himself again. It's just the tired old sequel trope. But no, he takes what he knows and improves on it, especially when he's faced with a foe that's even worse than Tai Lung. And shout out to Gary Oldman, who just crushed it as this peacock. It just he's just pure evil in the movie. And Gary Oldman is surprisingly hit or miss, but when he hits, he really hits. This movie, Darkest Hour, the Harry Potter movies he was in. Gary Oldman is phenomenal when he wants to be, and he really wanted to be in this one.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like Gary Oldman's character is a mix between a very dark, sinister character, but has the slightest sense of humor that you just enjoy his presence, as terrified as you are of him. Put the weapon by my side, a little to the left. Put the weapon by, okay, a little more to the left.
Yeah, it's so good. And honestly, I think we should probably cap it here because I think we can do many animation celebrations going down the road. It's such a deep well, and we could go so down them so many times. We could revisit this topic over and over again, like 3 or 4 times a year if we really wanted to.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I so move that we make this a regular thing. Maybe not a once a month thing, but maybe like maybe like a once a quarter kind of thing.
Yeah, there we go.
So moved and so seconded.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what is your favorite animated movies to all you out there, or movies? There can be two. Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. Show the animation genre some love. But that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. Jacob, tell the people where they can find you.
They can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can also subscribe to my two YouTube channels. My second channel, Storytime with Jacob, is where I do book reviews and read-alongs. I am just about to wrap up Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which will be the last book I'll be reading on the channel before I go into a hiatus on the series, because my upcoming Christmas series on my main channel, it's going to be hard to do the two channels together. But I do plan on bringing the reading channel back in the new year sometime. My main channel is where I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, all that fun stuff. I just recently posted my review of The Incredibles for celebrating Disney. I just had a weekend watch party on my channel where me, my sister, and Jason the Old Millennial did Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, inspired by Bob Chapek's recent comics, and wanted to prove a point that, hey, grown adults can get into animated movies too. And we watched Snow White. That was a fun time. If you want to watch the replay, you can. And then other videos coming on the channel. I also got my cinema roundup video for October, which features some of my first reactions to new releases in October, including my thoughts on Black Adam. I got a Peter Bogdanovich video dropping this week featuring my reviews of They All Laughed and Mask. And then I also got a review dropping for Enchanted for my Celebrating Disney series. So some exciting stuff coming to the channel. If you want to check it out, also be on the lookout for some Christmas videos coming on the channel for my upcoming Christmas series. So some exciting stuff ahead.
Go give Jacob a subscribe on both of those channels. It is always a privilege to have him on doing this podcast with me. As for this channel, I will be dropping a long-awaited cinema catch-up video for October, covering a bunch of movies I haven't had time to talk about yet. And then I, of course, will be seeing Black Panther Wakanda Forever later this week, actually tomorrow as this video drops. So I'll be seeing that tomorrow, and a review will be forthcoming. But thank you all so much for watching. That is Jacob Martin. My name is Ryan Cam. We will see you in the next one. You take care now.